Good afternoon. We're back on the record in Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas IRP plan, dockets number 2023 8E and 2023 10E. It's my understanding we are still in the rebuttal stage of the case being presented by Duke Energy. And all commissioners are present. Now all parties are present. And we are ready to proceed. I think you have a new witness up now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The companies would call to the stand Dewey Samuel Roberts.
I believe he's ready, waiting on you.
Mr. Roberts, if you'll raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon.
Are you the same Sammy Roberts who appeared in this proceeding earlier and presented direct testimony to the commission?
Yes, I am.
And just for the record, would you state your full name and business address, please?
Yes, my full name is Dewey Samuel Roberts II. I go by Sammy, and my address is 3401 Hillsborough Street, Raleigh, North Carolina.
And your position with the company, please, sir?
I'm the General Manager of Grid and Operations Planning.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared 33 pages of pre-filed direct testimony filed with the commission on October 24th of 2023?
I did.
I'm sorry, that's seem to be that is a factually accurate statement, but not pertinent at this juncture of the proceeding. Let's return to your rebuttal testimony. Did you cause to be prepared 42 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed with the commission on August 14th of 2024?
I did.
And if I ask you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Chair Powers, I'd ask that Mr. Roberts' pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Roberts will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Roberts, did you also cause to be prepared one exhibit labeled Roberts Rebuttal Exhibit 1 that was attached to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to that exhibit at this time?
I do not.
Chair Powers had asked that Mr. Roberts' pre-filed exhibit labeled Roberts Rebuttal Exhibit 1 be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Roberts identifies as Roberts Rebuttal Exhibit 1 will be marked for identification, placed in the record as exhibit number 25.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Roberts, did you prepare a summary of your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
I did.
Would you please present it to the commission at this time?
Yes. My rebuttal testimony responds to the Office of Regulatory Staff's contention that the company's 2023 Integrated Resource Plan should have included a list of planned radial transmission investments categorized as distribution planning projects under the IRP statute. I explained that the company's IRP fully complies with the IRP statute by providing an extensive overview describing the company's transmission system, including planned project investments, the transmission system planning process, and the key drivers of planned transmission investments on the company's systems. Table L2 in Appendix L listed transmission lines and associated facilities 100 kV or above that are under construction or for which DEC or DEP have approved specific plans for construction, and reflects a comprehensive list of 82 transmission projects planned for construction or under construction in the DEC and DEP transmission systems, including transmission-to-transmission transformers, transmission switching stations, transmission substations, transmission interconnection facilities interconnecting solar facilities, and network transmission lines. Although the companies do not interpret the statute to require details concerning distribution planning projects, the companies provided that information in discovery and have committed to providing it in future IRP proceedings. I also respond to Sierra Club and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Sierra Club, South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Upstate Forever, and Vote Solar, collectively CCL et al., Witness Goggin, and Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association, Witness Haggerty, regarding transmission and interconnection-related modeling issues impacting the proposed plan. I explained that the company's modeling appropriately reflects execution risk associated with the significant increases in the level of generator interconnections, including outage planning and coordination, interconnections requiring non-standard designs to interconnect to the transmission system, equipment lead times, long-duration network upgrades, delays in commissioning inverter-based resources, and developer permitting issues. I respond to interveners' various challenges to the way these assumptions and planning challenges have been incorporated in the company's modeling. I also respond to CCL et al. And CCBA regarding the company's transmission and interconnection process improvements. The companies recognize that transmission planning and resource planning must be sufficiently aligned to successfully meet the overall objective of providing service that is reliable and affordable. I highlight the steps the companies have taken to successfully implement the IRP execution plan from a transmission perspective. For example, the companies will continue to evaluate and prudently utilize grid-enhancing technologies and advanced transmission technologies as required by FERC Order 2023 as potential alternative solutions to transmission needs. I address CCBA witness Haggerty's and ORS witness Salter's testimonies concerning the company's effort to support future IRP execution through effective strategic transmission planning initiatives. I specifically highlight the company's efforts to integrate transmission planning and resource planning through the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative Multi-Value Strategic Transmission Study process aligned with the IRP. This new strategic transmission planning approach was recently approved by FERC and supports identification of no-regrets long-term strategic transmission projects for executing future IRPs. My testimony also emphasizes that the Red Zone Expansion Plan projects are critical to enable execution of the IRP on the proposed schedule. 7 of the 15 Red Zone Expansion Plan Phase 1 projects and 3 of the 7 proposed Red Zone 2.0 projects are in South Carolina. I agree with comments in the ORS report that these projects are needed and beneficial to the system, and I explained that constructing these projects will facilitate more efficient interconnection of new solar, battery energy storage, and potentially other new generation identified as needed in the IRP and proposed for execution in the near-term action plan. I also explained that the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative's 2023 study validated the need for the Red Zone Expansion Plan projects, and the companies plan to pursue approval of these transmission projects through the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative's 2024 Local Transmission Plan later this year. Finally, I outlined the company's considerations with respect to future local, regional, and interregional transmission planning efforts, including how the companies plan to incorporate directives of recently issued FERC Order 1920. This concludes my rebuttal testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Roberts available for cross-examination by the parties and questions from the commission.
Thank you very much. Sierra Club, any cross-examination?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Roberts. My name is Dory Jaffe on behalf of the Sierra Club.
Good afternoon.
If I could refer you to page 14 of your rebuttal testimony, please.
Okay.
And on that page, you respond to witness Michael Goggins' testimony where he cites examples of other regions that are interconnecting larger quantities of solar and storage per year as an indication that Duke should be doing the same. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And on the next page, on page 15, lines 3 through 12, you refer to events in 1996, 2011, and 2020 in California ISO that resulted in blackouts or loss of service. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was 3 major blackouts due to line contingencies and then resource adequacy issues in 2020 resulting in firm load shed.
Okay, but you'd agreed with me that none of those events were actually caused by generator interconnection practices?
Not directly. What I am trying to highlight is that the Cal ISO doesn't have an extreme focus, in my vantage point from having 30 years of system operations experience. They don't have a focus on reliability.
Okay, and that's fair, but the question you're responding to with respect to Mr. Goggins was that they were interconnecting larger quantities, and those particular blackouts were not a result of interconnection issues, correct?
That's correct, but if you interconnect a large amount of generation without ensuring the proper transmission is constructed or the transmission system is expanded properly, you can have big reliability issues such as this.
Okay, that's fair. And also on page 15, line 12, you reference a September 6th, 2022 California ISO incident that came, as you put it, dangerously close to requiring firm load shedding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that this event was because of a 10-day heat wave?
That's correct.
Okay. So again, that event had nothing to do with generator interconnection. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was a resource adequacy issue.
Okay, thank you. And if I could have you turn to page 17 of your rebuttal testimony, please.
Okay.
Lines 16 through 20, you're discussing that the network upgrade cost proxies were calculated using the results of the 2022 DICES. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the 2022 DICES, that included renewable projects that applied to interconnect. Is that correct?
That's correct. It included renewable solar batteries that were requesting interconnection to the DEC and DEP systems.
Okay. So is it safe to say that not all of the projects contained and identified in the 2022 DICES move forward, meaning they weren't actually all built?
From phase one, that's correct. And that's why we updated the cost using the phase two study, which more of those projects did move forward. And the costs were even more accurate because project development puts more effort into refining the costs going into phase two.
Okay. And so based on that, would you agree with me that the DICES is more of a reactive approach, meaning it's reacting to those that apply?
In this regard, I would say it's a more accurate approach because it's using real numbers. I didn't see where witness Goggin offered up any real numbers or real data for analytics associated with determining these cost proxies.
Okay. On page 18, lines 11 through 14, you agree that proactive transmission planning and efficient generator interconnection processes to interconnect renewable generation is critical to enable the reliable and least cost execution of your IRP. Did I read that correctly?
That's correct.
And so the multi-value strategic transmission planning, that's a more proactive process. Would you agree with me?
I agree. We're striving to put in place study processes within our local transmission planning process that bound and isolate no regrets transmission expansion projects that we can construct proactively.
Okay. So just to make sure we're clear, that is what Duke will be using going forward, this proactive multi-value planning process?
That's correct. And we've actually started the first 2024 MVST study within the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative.
So for the next IRP, will Duke's interconnection cost estimates come out of that proactive multi-value process?
We can consider the multi-value strategic transmission results associated with input to determining these cost proxies.
Okay.
If they're available in time. We're planning to conclude the study and publish a report around mid next year.
Okay. So for inclusion in the 2025 IRP update, is that what you're referring to?
That's correct. If it's available, I'll say that.
Okay. So would it then be assumed that it would be available for your next full IRP?
For the South Carolina full IRP, that's correct.
Okay. And were you listening when Ms. Meeks testified on rebuttal on Tuesday afternoon?
Yes.
So in response to a question from Commissioner Carolee Williams about the connection between standalone batteries and transmission, Ms. Meeks testified about two specific benefits. One was that the company can cite standalone storage where it owns transmission infrastructure because it's not land intensive and you may have existing acreage to tie in, which would have a lower cost to connect. And then her second point was that storage can be used to defer transmission investments where the analysis shows that a battery can be a more cost-effective solution than a transmission line. Do you agree with her statements about the benefits of batteries as it relates to transmission?
Sure, if you can locate it at a substation or site where you can leverage existing transmission infrastructure, yeah, it's going to lower the transmission cost. As far as using the storage as a transmission asset, we performed that study. We performed a non-traditional transmission solution study, and it's captured in Appendix G of the IRP, and it has shown that we haven't run into a case where it's economic for a battery to displace the reliability project identified by our NERC standard TPL 001 studies.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions from CCL SACE Upstate Forever?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
I believe Mr.
Yes.
Burns has some.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a few, pardon my headphones, but my speakers are acting up.
Go ahead.
Mr. Roberts, did you hear Mr. Haggerty testify yesterday?
I did.
Do you recall his testimony concerning production cost modeling?
I did, or I do remember his testimony.
Do you have a response as to his statements? And I think Mr. Goggins also talked about the benefits of a nodal analysis of the benefits of proposed transmission projects.
Yes, I can't argue that a nodal approach would provide more information with respect to production cost. We're just not there with respect to transitioning to nodal with respect to our MVST study for looking at that for production costs. But we do. With that said, we do plan to look at making that transition, but it probably won't be until the 2026 MVST study.
Let me clarify your first sentence there. I thought I heard you say you can't argue that that would not provide more information. I mean, can you be clear about? I'm not sure I heard you correctly. I want to make sure the record is clear.
Yeah, that summarizes what I said.
Okay, so nodal studies would provide more specific information. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And as you said, the MVST process is currently underway, correct? For the 2026 study or the 2024 study?
That's correct.
And as I understand it, and just hope that you can help me clarify this for the panel, that CTPC, you work with the CTPC in addition to your position with Duke, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm a participant on the Oversight Steering Committee.
Thank you. And you have been engaged in the development of what the MVST study is going to look like for this time around in 2024, correct?
That's correct.
And it's still not yet determined, or at least Duke and CTPC have not yet fully responded to suggestions by other participants as to changes they would like to see in the proposed MVST study. Is that right?
Subject to check. I wasn't able to participate in the Transmission Advisory Group meeting yesterday, and so I'm not completely up to date on the status or the comments that were made in that meeting.
Okay, and neither am I, because you and I were sitting in the same room. So, but needless to say that MVST so far has been kind of an ongoing process. We haven't really reached a final idea of what that study is going to be, have we?
We have not reached a final study scope document.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Would you agree, and I think you might have covered this with prior council's questions, but I just want to clarify. Would you agree that it is important in proactive transmission planning that generation planning and transmission planning inform each other in an iterative process?
Iterative is a strong word. If you, I mean, it takes, as you know, as a tag member for the CTPC, it takes a long time to gather all the inputs, make sure they're as accurate as they can be, and determine locations and sizes for the resources identified in the portfolio, and then conduct the study, look at all the contingencies, come up with the needs, and then determine potential solutions, try to assign cost to those solutions. It takes a long time to do all that work. So the MVST study I don't see will be any different than past studies. It's just we need to try to make sure we get as much right on the front end to make sure that the results are credible and valid, and we do come up with no regrets transmission projects similar to past studies.
But do you disagree with Mr. Goggins and Mr. Haggerty that it is important that generation planning and transmission planning inform each other?
Yes, I've stated that in my rebuttal testimony, and that's one of the reasons that we are trying as best we can to align the MVST study with the IRP.
And so in its approval of an IRP, would you agree that a state commission has the ability to supervise and suggest approaches to transmission planning in order to assure the compliance or planning with the IRP?
Yeah. Well, the CTPC process, the local transmission planning process, is a FERC jurisdictional process.
Yes.
And so, that's basically who has jurisdiction over the MVST process. They're the ones that approved our process. The commission has a right to ask questions about our process and the results of our process.
And they can seek reports and on how that process is going as it goes forward, right?
That's correct, but I will say that the ORS participates as a tag member in the CTPC, so they get firsthand information with our transmission advisory group meetings.
Understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. No more questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Walmart,
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Just a few, hopefully. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Roberts. How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
I'm Josh Alston with the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I just had a few quick questions for you. Could you explain to me just a little bit more what exactly the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative is, just in simple terms?
Yes, so Order 890, and there were a couple of requirements in Order 1000, although that's more of a regional related order, regional transmission planning order. But Order 890 required transmission providers to have a local transmission planning process, and that's how we meet that FERC order requirement. Is we have the Carolinas Transmission Planning Collaborative, and we have the participants are Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress, Electricities, and North Carolina Electric Corporation.
Okay, and previously, I believe it was called the North Carolina Transmission Planning Collaborative. Is that right?
You're correct.
Okay. I believe that collaborative, or currently the CTPC, did a public policy study in 2023. Does that sound right?
That's correct.
Could you explain to me just sort of briefly what that policy study was?
Yes. So one of the requirements associated with Order 890 is, and Order 1000, some of the statements in there, is that we have an avenue for stakeholders to present public policy requests. And we received public policy request in 2020, beginning of 2023. And that study is the result of basically creating a study scope doing a study, coming up with transmission needs, and showing potential solutions for some of those, which are RZEP projects.
Okay, and there's two sets of RZEP projects. There's 1.0 and 2.0, is that right?
That's correct.
And are both of those included in the near-term action plan?
So subject to check, RZEP 1.0, I don't believe is included. RZEP 2.0 is included, subject to check.
Okay, and I don't want to get into confidential information, so if I'm going that way, please let me know. But do you have a general estimated cost of the RZIP 1.0 build out, and then the same for the RZIP 2.0?
Yeah, so the current cost, subject to check, the current cost associated with RZEP 1.0 is around $490 million. And then the current Class 5 estimate for RZEP 2.0, including the project submitted in the supplemental direct testimony, is around $330 million.
Okay, but you're not, in the IRP process here today, you're not asking for approval of any of those costs from the commission, are you?
We are not asking for approval from this commission, no.
Okay, great. The CTPC public policy study, is the public policy part there, is that the 70% emissions reduction in the North Carolina carbon plan? Is that what that's referencing?
So public policy as defined in Order 890 is a state requirement. However, I will say the Red Zone Expansion Plan projects just evaluated on reliability and resilience benefits alone show benefits greater than cost. So discarding any decarbonization benefits or other benefits, production cost or other benefits, they stand on their own with reliability and resiliency benefits to customers.
Okay, and I won't disagree with you on that, but just asking, is the North Carolina Carbon Plan one of the motivators or drivers of that study?
Like I said, we have to offer the avenue for stakeholders to submit public policy requests to the CTPC in the local transmission planning process, and that study just reflects acting on those public policy requests for study.
Okay. Just shifting focus a little bit here. I'm just going to put a part of your testimony up here. And this is table 3 from page, I think, 38. It's a, can you see that okay?
Yes, I can see it fine.
Okay, perfect. What exactly are we looking at here?
So that was the portfolio that we studied for this 2023 CTPC study. And in the public policy request, we were requested to start with portfolio P1 associated with the 2022 IRP. And there were some slight modifications made with respect to CCs and CTs, I believe, subject to check. But nonetheless, the rest of it pretty much represents starting with portfolio P1 and then going up to 12.5 gigawatts of solar and solar paired with storage. That was a requirement of in the public policy request as well.
Okay.
And ironically, this portfolio resembles P3 fall base case somewhat.
Okay, and so you said that this is a similar portfolio to the P3 fall base.
It resembles P3 fall base somewhat, yes.
Okay, and so these resources that were modeled, what's the date for the onboard of all of these resources? Does it match up with the IRP timeline?
Yeah, so this study was, we do studies 10 years out. We may look at longer term going forward with respect to aligning with 1920, but currently we do 10 years out. So this reflects the portfolio for summer 2033. We also studied this portfolio for winter 33-34.
Okay, and so that may explain why there's only 285 megawatts of SMR as opposed to the 600 that is adopted through the P3 fall base?
Yeah, the base planning period, subject to check, would go out to 2038, I believe.
Okay, and so then that would also explain why the amount of offshore wind in this study is a third of what the P3 fall base requires.
It could. I mean, like I said, we started with a P1 from 2022 and made some slight modifications, such as to get up to 12.5 gigawatts of solar and solar paired with storage for the study.
Do you think an updated study that better reflects the full amount of sort of offshore wind, SMR, those sorts of things may be helpful?
Ironically, I'm glad you asked that, because in the NVST study, that's one of the beauties of NVST is you're looking at multiple scenarios. So we're looking at P1, we're looking at P3 fall base, and we're looking at different sensitivities associated with those portfolios. So those for example, P1, even if you executed on the P3 fall base, which we believe is the preferred portfolio, even if you executed on that pace, it could give you a good glimpse at going 15 years into the future or 20 years into the future with respect to your transmission study, even though it's only a 10-year transmission study, because you're looking at resources that will be interconnected 15 years out, 20 years out.
Okay, but you would agree with me that the current P3 fall base, it has a higher or greater amount of megawatts that will need to go on the system than this sort of total here.
If you look beyond 2033, that's correct. You're
Sure,
correct.
and I will
Yeah.
agree with you that they are slightly different timings, which is
Right.
why I want to get that clarification. And I don't know if you were here earlier, but as I've said before, I'm just an attorney. I'm not a nuclear guy, so I'm also not a transmission guy. Could you explain to me a little bit what a MVST is?
Yes. So it stands for Multi-Value Strategic Transmission, and it's a study process that, once again, takes different scenarios, different sensitivities. We allow the stakeholders to provide inputs to what scenarios they would like for us to study. The OSC itself can come up with a scenario to study, but it looks at, once again, for the 2024 study, P1 portfolio, P3 fall base case portfolio. It looks at different sensitivities like increased load, or different locations for solar, versus what we currently see with a little bit more located in the DP area versus the DC area. So it tries to use those scenarios to capture multiple outcomes, multiple futures. And if you do that versus using a snapshot approach, you're going to see commonalities between those studies, where you see this 230 kV line upgrade or problem shows up in all these scenarios. You probably need to look at that one from a proactive transmission perspective and look at doing something proactive to upgrade that line or some other solution associated with that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, I think you did, and I appreciate it, and I understand that need to be proactive. Shifting focus just a little bit and more just drilling in on this offshore wind issue. Were you able to hear the prior panel this morning?
yes, I was in the hearing room while they were testifying.
Okay, and so I think you heard some discussion about offshore wind and its executability. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
What steps have you taken or your team taken in evaluating the transmission necessary to bring on, practically, how do we get that 2,400 megawatts onshore?
Yes, so there's information in Appendix L on offshore wind, but we utilized the 2020 NCTPC study. It was NCTPC at the time. Now, like you said, it's CTPC. We used that study to basically assess the best point of interconnection and arrived at Newbern being the best point of interconnection due to its current interconnectivity with the rest of the system. And to get beyond this 800 megawatts, you're most likely going to need a 500 kV line. And that 500 kV line would go from Newbern to our Womack substation to our Wake substation. And we've had some analysis, some preliminary engineering right-of-way assessment. We actually own right-of-way on that corridor. And so we've done some preliminary work with respect to assessing the cost associated with that 500 kV line from New Bern to Womack to Wake. But you would need that backbone if you went much above this 800 megawatt level, trying to import it into the system reliably.
How far is that? Just estimate between those 2 points, New Bern and then.
New Bern to Womack to Wake's about 100 miles.
Okay, so you need a 500 kilovolt, is that right?
That's correct.
Kilovolt line. Okay. And you said you'd done some initial cost estimates. Do you know how much, roughly what that might be?
Subject to check. I believe it's around $1 billion. It may be a little bit over $1 billion for that 500 kV HVAC line.
Okay. And that's just to get the so that's, I'm trying to find my map here. Maybe there's a map in your testimony. I think there is. Here we go. This is, if it'll.
Yep.
So I know it's not very, well, maybe it'll get better. Can everyone see
Yes.
that okay?
I
Okay.
can see it.
So the 100 miles that you're talking about, that's on North Carolina. That's on land, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so I think we talked about earlier with Mr. McIntyre that the actual one of the couple of options, including the one where a non-regulated Duke entity owns some property or a lease, sorry, is maybe down here. We were talking about, you know, you could call it North Carolina water, you could call it South, but you'd agree with me? It's roughly here.
That's correct.
Okay, and so have you done any study on the transmission requirements to get the electricity from that lease area up to New Bern?
Yes. So we did provide an estimate, cost estimate, in the transmission cost proxies number 4 input into the IRP. Now, it's not networked transmission. It's not networked with the other transmission system. It's really a interconnection facility for the resource. But we did provide a cost estimate, and that was put forth in discovery to a couple of interveners.
And just ballpark on that, do you have a sense of what that estimate is roughly?
I don't recall what that estimate was.
Are we talking about millions, tens of millions, billions?
I don't recall.
Okay, is there someone else that may know that number?
Possibly the modeling team.
Possibly the modeling team.
Yes.
Okay. But you're saying that cost in and of itself was a part of the model inputs.
That's correct.
Okay, so that plus the $1 billion for the other 100 miles is baked into the selection of the offshore wind for the P3 fall base.
That's correct. That's my understanding.
Okay, great. And I believe you said something in that answer about how it was a cost basis based on it not networked in. Could you explain? Maybe I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
Are you saying that? Sorry, let me ask. Withdraw that question. Your comment about it being not networked in. Did you mean that the cost could actually be higher by working it in, or do you mean that the cost may decrease as you get synergies?
No, I mean, if you think about the highway system here in South Carolina, the 500 kV line would be like a interstate highway, and off of that interstate highway, you may go to another major highway or even a secondary road, and then eventually think about it, a long driveway to a business, a big business, warehouse or data center or whatever. That long driveway to the big business would be like the interconnection facility I'm talking about to get to New Bern. So it's like the business but once you get to the secondary road, that secondary road is connected to a lot of other roads, and that interstate is connected to even more roads. And so that's like the transmission system. Once you get to a certain point, connecting a resource to the transmission system, it's interconnected with a lot more transmission lines through that networked system, just like the highway system.
Okay, and so you're saying that in that sort of reference, the line that runs from New Bern out to the sea is sort of like the long driveway at your house. Is that right?
I refer to a big business, but yes, that's
Oh,
correct.
sure. Oh,
Yeah.
the big business. Okay. Okay. And so as it interconnects and works into the network further up the chain, is that additional costs that were not modeled yet?
So we tried to make sure we captured the cost, all the cost. So that 500 kV line and even underlying lower voltage class lines, we tried to capture that cost associated with like 115 kV upgrades or 230 kV upgrades that would be needed.
Okay. Just a couple more questions, and I appreciate your time today. You had said that, like the driveway up to the big business. Is it your understanding that the offshore wind generation assets would be owned by the company if they were to be put online?
That would have been a great question for Witness McIntyre.
That's true. Perhaps it's a question for Mr. Quinto. Okay, I appreciate your time, Mr. Roberts. Thanks.
Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin. Now we'll go to commissioner questions. Commissioner Belser.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon.
Appreciate you being here. In your testimony, in response to ORS, you've indicated that the company is willing to provide more, I'm going to call them transmission lines, and we'll get into what that means in a minute, than what was included in the comprehensive, in this one.
So yes, we've agreed to provide in future IRPs distribution planning projects. However, I will state that I'm confident we fully complied with the statute as written because it's pretty vague.
I understand, and I know anytime that non-compliance and utility are in the same sentence, that feelings get hurt, and I would be the same way. I don't want to be called non-compliant either. But I don't want to get there. I mean, and you know what raised this issue, do you not?
Yes, I do.
And it was a 46-volt transmission line up in the upstate and a substation that folks are upset about.
It's 100 kV transmission radial. Yes.
Okay, so that's 100 kV. Why wasn't it on this one? Because it's not more than 100?
No. For the reasons I stated in my rebuttal testimony, it says a summary of transmission investments is what the statute says. And it's under the IRP, right? It's under the Integrated Resource Plan statutes. So we included more information than we've ever included in an IRP, 82 projects, and projects that we felt were associated with what's needed for resources, wheeling the resource energy on the network transmission system. Those are the projects that we included. And they are categorized as distribution planning projects in our database. And so we did not associate those projects with something that is correlated to an IRP.
Okay.
Because we don't use them as inputs to the modeling or other inputs.
And I know that you've discussed, and tell me what a radial transmission line is as opposed to the transmission line that the lines that Duke put, and maybe I just need to understand the distinction.
So radial is just like the driveway to the big business that I refer to. So the network transmission is like the interstate highways that have a lot of connectivity to other highways and interstates. And then you have major highways that have a lot of connectivity. I think I referred to the interstates as like 500 kV, but it could be double circuit 230. And then your major highways could be like single circuit 230 or double circuit 115 or 100 kV. And then your secondary roads are single circuit 100 kV or 44 kV. And then you have like these driveways that are like distribution or transmission radials.
So the size of the line, whether it's, I don't know, is it 46? There's something in the 40s that's a line, and then there's 100, and the Siting Act pertains to those that are over 125 kV.
Right.
It's not the size of the line that determines whether it's transmission or distribution.
That's correct. It's voltage class, and NERC
Okay,
goes.
I said it's not.
Oh.
Because what I think I'm understanding
correct.
you saying is with these radial distribution lines, even though it's 100 kV, it's not what you would classify as transmission under what you do, because they're not going to be a whole lot of other interconnections on it. Is that?
Well,
am I getting there?
If I look at NERC's definition for bulk electric system, talks about the transmission system, and it's 100 kV that's networked. It does not include a radial transmission line that feeds a retail load as a bulk electric system transmission facility.
So this line, this 100 kV line that is going to, that's proposed and going to a proposed substation up there, it's coming off of a transmission line off the bulk electric system, but to a substation to feed these retail loads.
You're correct.
Is that correct?
You're correct.
Okay. So these kind of this situation in the upstate here just kind of falls through the cracks because it's not going to be subject to siting. Is that correct? As far as you know, I know you're not a lawyer, or I don't think you're a lawyer, but
I am not a lawyer.
Okay. Congratulations. It's not subject to the Siting Act, and it's not really subject to listing in the IRP. So how do folks know that it's going to come through their area? Is where
I mean, for this project, I talked with the project manager, and my understanding is that there was multiple. We followed our standard industry approach, comprehensive approach. We had community outreach. We had meetings with public officials, local county council, a lot of different meetings associated with this. So there were opportunities associated with that interaction, and I think from what I heard, the local community exercised those opportunities and provided input that we considered.
Mr. Roberts, I'm not mad about this. I'm just trying to understand. And if there is a hole somewhere, do we need to fill it? But I appreciate it. And I think we'd heard some of that previously about the outreach. So anyway, I appreciate your explanation, and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. So, Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I understand you're a Wolfpack engineer, right?
That is correct.
Do you think we could get them to change it from the textile bowl to the engineer's bowl?
I would love that. I would love for them to adopt that recommendation.
All right. And I don't want to beat your transmission definition to death, but Greenville Water Systems transmission water lines were 72 inches. Ours were 24.
Right.
But same purpose.
Right.
All this, in your case, 230 volt or whatever, going down and stuff will branch off of it. Is that a general
Yes,
idea?
that's a good analogy.
And you probably answered this, but I guess you want to answer it more simply for me. And I wrote this down as I was hearing the discussion. How does Duke decide which transmission project plans are included in the IRP? Is it exclusively based on what you just said? It's pretty much transmission and everything else outside of that you consider really distribution or whatever, what you just explained to
That's correct. We have a database, and we query that database, and one of the query filters is transmission. And so the list that's reflected in L2 of Appendix L is what we queried for this IRP. But like I said, we have agreed, based on the ORS's recommendation, that we will include these distribution planning projects going forward. It's just another query.
Well, I appreciate it. I followed what you said, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Final thing, I guess in the questioning from Oris attorney, can't remember the name, the public policy request study you were talking about. And looking at that map, I remembered seeing the map, but I don't remember any of the details. Did the study focus specifically on transmission lines within North Carolina, or did it affect the ones that came into South Carolina also? Because
No,
I think
sir.
it'd be hard to divide.
No, sir. It looked at the map showed solar facilities that requested interconnection, and a lot of those were in South Carolina. And so it looked at interconnecting those solar facilities, whether in North Carolina or South Carolina, what transmission was needed associated with that portfolio that was shown. But once again, one of the primary instance or interest was to look at the transmission impacts from that solar and solar paired with storage, because that was one of the requests in the public policy request, is to go to 12.5 gigawatts of solar and solar paired with storage.
Thank you. And I guess what I'm thinking about, or what I'm trying to get to, and I recognize the challenge that Duke has, dual state. But thinking about that study and whatever folks were in the room, providing input, receiving information, and so forth, were there representatives or anyone from South Carolina that was technically knowledgeable or involved or otherwise?
Right. So we do have South Carolina, not participants, but South Carolina stakeholders that are members of our transmission advisory group, and they participate in those TAG meetings.
Well, good, but what I'm really thinking about was not saying that the stakeholders didn't represent the customers, maybe they did, but I'm thinking primarily, was there anyone, any entity or anyone representing the customers of South Carolina?
So, yes, there's a large load serving entity that participates in that group, not mentioning any names. And then, of course, the Office of Regulatory Staff participates.
Okay. All I want to know. I mean, I know how complex it is, and I know you guys have a tough time. I just want to make sure somebody's looking after us.
Right.
And our customers. Other than that, I appreciate it. You answered, I feel like, very candidly. And I'm going to have to say this with no disrespect, but go Tigers.
No disrespect taken. I think we'll get trounced.
Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yesterday, I think there was some conversation about some ideas that might augment transmission planning within the IRP. And I appreciate your shaking your head. And I'll read what was referenced yesterday. It's because neither one of us are lawyers, but 58-37-40B22. And it says an integrated resource plan may include distribution resource plans or integrated system operation plans. So that's a big may. We don't have any rules related to that now. But while you're here, I wanted to get some input from you as to whether that's something that we ought to spend more time thinking about, getting input on guidance for inclusion of in those elements in future IRPs. So the question is, do you have any advice over whether we ought to look at rulemaking for distribution resource plans and integrated system operation plans?
Right. I think we, without calling it, the title you just mentioned, I think Witness Duff did put forth a lot of distribution resources, whether it's EVs or EDSM programs. I think he put forth a lot of those that are connected to distribution. So indirectly, I think we capture that in the IRP.
Agreed. But just a little bit ago, you and Commissioner Belzer were having a conversation about, compliance. And I'm not saying anything about compliance now, but I'm saying, as generation changes and as transmission changes, are these areas that we ought to collaboratively work on creating more specific metrics, or not metrics, but kind of a scope of what ought to be included in an IRP in those realms?
Right. Just make sure we're considering all the bases, right? Or covering all the bases.
Right.
is what
Right.
you're
And so
referring
that
to.
you know what to include, how to meet this information challenge.
Right. I mean, I think we already have a lot of that information within the company, so it'd just be a matter of, if the commission desires additional information in that area, we probably already have it that we could provide. So I know that we participated with the ORS, and I think it was Lawrence Berkeley subject to check with respect to having discussions on integrated distribution planning. I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay. And I guess, I've said a few times how I've seen in 4 years how IRPs have improved and become more effective. And one of the themes I'm seeing of this IRP hearing is really how, this is not our parents' energy production realm anymore. And whether, in the spirit of doing this better and better, would having specifying some requirements in the future regarding distribution and operation plans be helpful?
Once again, just to make sure we're thoroughly covering the bases. I think we do have a lot of that information already, so it can be provided.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No further questions.
Anything further from commissioners? Any redirect?
Just briefly, I'm going to step to the podium. I'm going to get this eventually. Mr. Roberts, you heard some questions from Commissioner Belzer and from Commissioner Caston about how you scope the transmission projects that were included in Appendix L, and you referenced this table, Appendix L2, a number of times. Just want to start with, I think one of the key considerations that you highlighted in your testimony in terms of the scope of planned transmission projects. Could you speak to that? I'm not sure if you can read or see the highlighted language I have on the screen there. Can you see it?
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about how you scope the transmission projects?
Yeah, I mean, like I referred to, we look for projects that are correlated to the IRP when we're composing our list of projects for Table L2 in this case. for the IRP. And once again, it was 84 projects that were shown in Table L2 this go round, more than we've ever had before. In fact, more than triple what we had in the 2022 IRP.
Thank you. And specific to the phase at which the projects would trigger your spreadsheet, they had to be either planned or under construction, and you addressed that in your rebuttal testimony.
That's correct. Planned or under construction.
Okay. And the types of projects, you didn't include radial distribution projects, but you did include, I think you mentioned in your summary, a comprehensive list of projects from transmission to transmission transformers, transmission switching stations, substations, interconnection facilities, interconnecting solar facilities, and network transmission lines. Is that right?
That's correct.
And just briefly, I think you made this comment earlier, but you made a very diligent effort to provide a well-organized Table 2 that has an extensive level of detail in terms of these projects.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. One other thing to clarify for the record, you had a conversation for council with ORS about the near-term action plan and the company's, what's included, and there was a reference to whether, I think you said that you thought it was just the RZEP 2.0 projects that were identified, but would you accept, let me see if this is Table SCS2 from the South Carolina chapter supplement, that's the company's updated near-term action plan?
That's correct.
And why does it say continue the RZEP 1.0 projects? Is that because they've already been approved?
So for these local transmission planning projects, they have to be approved through a FERC-approved local transmission planning process, which RZEP 1.0 projects have been. They're captured in a local CTPC local transmission plan that's been approved by the Oversight Steering Committee. The RZEP projects, 2.0 projects, have not been approved, and they're not in a local transmission plan currently.
But the company's pursuing that through the CTPC as it's been discussed today.
That's correct.
And if the commission wanted to get more information on those RZEP 1.0 projects and how they were developed and how they were progressed and where they are in the process, pages 23 to 26 of Appendix L, would that be a good place to go look?
Yes, that would be a great place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any recross from any party?
Just very briefly.
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Roberts again.
Hello.
Just with that added clarification on the NTAP, including both RZEP 1.0 and 2.0, just to reaffirm, you're not seeking any cost recovery here on RZEP 1.0 or 2.0?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I think you talked about the Oversight Steering Committee on Redirect. That is the body that approves the RZEP 1.0 and 2.0 plans?
They approve our annual local transmission plan and approve studies, and yes, that's
okay.
correct.
And so the CPTC committee or group, they don't approve anything, right? That's more of a process under where you take in information and evaluations.
So what's been approved for by FERC as our local transmission planning process has the Oversight Steering Committee, which are load serving entity participants. It has the Planning Working Group, which is basically the engineers that conduct the study. It has the Transmission Advisory Group, which is our stakeholders for CTPC that provide input and those requests that I was talking about earlier. And then we have an independent administrator that basically make sure we try to reach consensus and make sure we stay in adherence with our transmission tariff that's been approved by FERC. So we do have an independent entity as well.
Okay, and you mentioned that there are South Carolina participants on the CPTC process, but there are no South Carolina ratepayer representatives involved in the Oversight Steering Committee, are there?
There's not a load serving entity from South Carolina yet. A load serving entity from South Carolina has made an inquiry on joining, and that's it's basically going to be an annual process. that takes place in the fourth quarter, and that new participant would start the first of the calendar year.
But that does not include ORS.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. No other questions?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Roberts, I just have one question, just for information, really. Radio transmission, that's normally a rural area or a sparsely populated area. Is that where that is mainly used?
I would say generally that's correct.
And because it's like one source for several places, that's kind of a low cost form, a lower cost form of delivering the product.
That's correct. I would agree with that.
So, and having grown up in a rural area, when one goes out on radio, everybody goes out. Is that pretty
You are
fair?
correct.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you. Now they're making fun of where I live. All right. Is that all we got?
That's all we've got. If Mr. Roberts could be excused, we would appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. You are excused. You may stand down. Next witness.
If it pleases the chair, the companies would next call Peter Hofflich to the stand.
Come up and be sworn.
Mr. Hofflich, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hofflich. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Yeah, it's Peter C. Hofflich.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Duke Energy as a principal engineer in our Generation Execution and Technologies group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 6 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your testimony at this time?
Well, yes. Have one small change on page 5. Line 10, the word carbon should be replaced with the word hydrogen.
Aside from that change, if I asked you the same questions in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would be.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I move that Mr. Hofflich's pre-filed rebuttal testimony as corrected from the stand be entered into the records if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony, Mr. Hofflich, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hofflich, have you prepared a summary of your rebuttal testimony?
I have.
Would you please read that at this time?
In my rebuttal testimony, I respond to concerns raised by Office of Regulatory Staff witness James Finley Salter, as well as Sierra Club and South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Upstate Forever, and Vote Solar witness Dr. Rampani, regarding the company's reasonable hydrogen assumptions, the cost of natural gas combustion turbine conversion, and the hydrogen landscape. At this time, I have confidence in the company's hydrogen production price forecast since it is based on the averaging of 3 independent third-party cost projections that are relied upon in the industry. The companies have included an estimated cost for infrastructure in the projected cost of hydrogen based upon the best information available and the company's fuel supply judgment. As the hydrogen landscape evolves, the companies will continue to evaluate the potential clean hydrogen could bring to further diversify the company's energy mix, refine their hydrogen production price forecasts, check and adjust as necessary, and provide updates in the next comprehensive IRP proceeding. This concludes my rebuttal testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Hofflich. Mr. Chairman, he's now available for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick. Sierra Club, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
No questions.
Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
No questions, but thank you.
Walmart Incorporated.
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions.
Commissioners. Commissioner Caston, one question.
One question. I counted this time. In your opinion, how far down the road before, we have economic production, distribution, use of hydrogen?
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? Because this is really sort of new. I would say, I'd like to just say that there's a lot happening in the hydrogen kind of space. We see the DOE's putting in, I think, $9 billion, and there's been 7 hydrogen hubs selected, and they're meant to kind of start connecting producers and users and getting that distribution started and ramped up. So it's really encouraging. Kind of difficult to predict how quickly that will go, right? There's a lot of combustion turbine demonstrations happening as well, including our own in Florida, which will be 100%, hydrogen-fired unit. When we've looked at hydrogen entering the system, we've been pretty conservative out in 2035. I think we start with 1% blended in a pipeline. I feel like that's pretty conservative and safe. I think we'll be ahead of that by the point in time. But again, I think every year we'll watch and check and adjust. You've heard this term a lot from us, right? Check and adjust, to see how that landscape's developing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. No more questions.
Chair Powers.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So, how do you see hydrogen working with the existing natural gas system? I mean, is it more corrosive, or?
It's also a very good question. So there are today 1,500 miles of pipeline that handle 100% hydrogen, mostly to serve the petrochemical business and industry. And so we can do it. We can move hydrogen through pipelines. The more important question, I believe, is how do can our natural gas pipelines adapt, adjust, modify to handle hydrogen? We really need to evaluate each pipeline independently, given its age, material construction, the stresses that pipeline's under to determine how much it potentially can handle, and then what upgrades it may need. And that's work that has to be done coming up. I will say there's been a lot of demonstrations and trials. I think I've seen, looking at global blending, up to 20% blending in pipelines. Most of those have been shorter duration demonstrations to evaluate the capabilities of those pipes. I think there's one distribution company in Washington State that's blending small amounts in continuously now of hydrogen. So I think we have work to do to determine what the pipelines can handle, but that's moving ahead as well.
And what about storage combined with liquid LNG or whatever? Is that same kind of a story?
Another really good question, because when we think about our natural gas pipeline systems today, we utilize storage in the Gulf Coast, for example, in salt caverns. And so there's work being done there as well. I think it's the largest hydrogen storage facility in the world is in Mississippi. I believe it is in a salt cavern. There's work going on supported by the Department of Energy in general, looking at other storage options, including saline aquifers, gas wells or formations that have been depleted and could potentially be used. I don't think they've been used for storage yet, but they're being evaluated. So I think we'll need that combination of storage and pipes to really move hydrogen. And again, early, but what's encouraging is there's work being done in that area.
And just generally speaking, how is hydrogen produced these days? I have no idea.
Oh, well, that's a really good question as well. We've assigned these colors to hydrogen, and it's, and it ties their production to certain, certain means of production. I think a lot of people don't like the colors, but I think they're useful because they make you think about how it's produced. So today, most of the hydrogen is produced by essentially splitting natural gas. Methane's CH4, so you split the two, right? And yet you get a lot of CO2 emitted from that. It's a very large CO2 emitting process. So one means of essentially cleaning that hydrogen is to capture the CO2, similar to what we talk about with power generation. Capture the CO2, store it away. Now you've got what they call blue hydrogen, which is a cleaner hydrogen. And there's some variations on that splitting of methane, but there's another version called turquoise, if you can imagine. So between gray and blue, now we have turquoise, which it produces a solid carbon instead of a gaseous carbon. There's been a lot of focus on a different method of hydrogen production, and that is electrolysis. And in this case, we're splitting water. We have H2O, so now we're getting water and oxygen. So we would take energy, electricity, and depending upon the source of electricity, if it's renewables, they call that green hydrogen, very low carbon intensity. If it's nuclear, for whatever reason, it's called pink hydrogen. So nuclear also has a low carbon footprint, right? And so you can produce, hydrogen through the same process of splitting water. And there's one other one that's starting to become more evaluations taking place. It's a geological formation of hydrogen. This is hydrogen that's formed deep in the earth and similar to where we see natural gas, down in the earth, but different areas where they're actually drilling to get into this hydrogen to access that hydrogen. And that's very early stages, but there's been a number of wells that have been drilled that have found this hydrogen, deep underground. Hopefully that answered your question.
Well, that's a lot more than I even imagined. I'm thinking that I heard something recently about producing hydrogen from trees. Have you heard anything about that?
From trees?
Trees.
Yeah, so maybe what they're talking about is like you can also essentially gasify biomass, trees or crops, and you can create hydrogen. There's a company in Indiana that's going to do that with a gasification process. It happens to be on an old Duke site. That's why I know a little bit about it. And they're going to capture the CO2 once they gasify the biomass, and then they're going to produce ammonia with the hydrogen. And that'll be green ammonia to serve the agricultural industry.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Any redirect?
None from the company's Chair Powers.
Thank you very much.
I'd ask that this witness be excused, please.
You are excused. You may stand down. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Next witness.
Thank you, sir. The companies will next call to the witness stand J. Samuel Holman.
Mr. Holman, will you raise your right hand, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Holman. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is John Samuel Holman III. I go by Sam.
And are you the same Samuel Holman that previously appeared and presented direct testimony in this case?
Yes, I am.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared 30 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed with the commission on August, I think I've got the wrong date here. I believe it was October 24th, 2024?
Yes, I did. I did file the rebuttal testimony.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony at this time?
No, I do not.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
I'm sorry, I'm going to correct that. I'm going to go back to when you pre-filed your rebuttal testimony. Was that on August 14th, 2024?
Yes, that was it. Yes, I did.
Thank you for that. Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. Holman's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Holman will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Holman, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared one exhibit labeled Holman Rebuttal Exhibit 1 that was attached to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to that exhibit at this time?
No, I do not.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. Holloman's pre-filed exhibit labeled Holloman Rebuttal Exhibit 1 be entered in as the next composite hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Holman smartphone identification will be placed in the record as exhibit number 26.
And Mr. Holloman, did you prepare a summary of your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please present that at this time?
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, fellow commissioners. My rebuttal testimony responds to several recommendations from the Office of Regulatory Staff, ORS, as well as other interveners. My rebuttal testimony highlights a number of key takeaways. First, the company's preferred P3 fall-based portfolio is the most reasonable, least risk portfolio from a reliability perspective. Second, dispatchable resources play a critical role in not allowing not only allowing system operators the flexibility to address real-time system needs, but are also necessary tools to keep the lights on year-round. Third, though an important part of the company's future, grid edge programs are not comparable to dispatchable resources. Finally, the company's energy transmission plans adequately comply with NERC reliability risk guidance. In Section 2 of my testimony, I elaborate on how the company's preferred portfolio, P3 Fall Base, balances reliability considerations as required by the IRP statute. Aside from assessing operational reliability through the reliability verification modeling step, the companies considered how the portfolios would operate in the real time, including by ensuring adequate reserves would be available to meet anticipated loads. Carefully managing the pace of the energy transition is essential to allow timely course corrections as uncertainty in technology cost and availability are resolved, and ensuring the resource plans includes a diverse, balanced portfolio of resources. Reviewing the IRP from an operational perspective, I am confident that portfolio P3 Fall Base has the balanced, diverse resource mix, and more specifically, the capabilities needed to reliably serve the company's customers and to meet load. On the other hand, from an operational perspective, portfolio P0 introduces additional reliability risks to the company's resource plan because it plans for a less diverse mix of resources and relies on extended operation of aging coal units. In Section 3 of my testimony, I respond to specific reliability considerations raised by the ORS and interveners. Specifically, I explain that as the companies retire aging coal units and add variable energy resources to the system, new dispatchable natural gas will be key to ensure the reliability of the grid, especially during extreme weather events. I also explained why renewable resources are necessary to achieve the diverse, balanced mix of resources and capabilities needed to reliably serve customer needs. Together, solar and battery storage resources increase the availability of solar energy and give operators the flexibility to use these renewable resources at times of peak, supporting the reliability of the system. Battery storage also provide additional ramping and peaking functions, both of which are essential reliability services. Finally, I discussed the contribution of grid edge programs to maintaining a reliable system. I note that while customer-sited programs are an important part of the resource plan, they are situational resources and system operators cannot reliably call upon them to turn on or off to meet load on demand, such as they are as part of a day-to-day tool used by system operators. I conclude my testimony by explaining that portfolio P3 Fall Base most appropriately addresses the reliability considerations required by the IRP statute because it presents a diverse mix of resources to be incorporated at an orderly pace, while replacing critical grid capabilities with new resources before retiring aging generation. The resource mix in portfolio P3 Fall Base addresses the two highest reliability risks identified by NERC, the changing generation mix and resource adequacy, as it plans for a resource mix that operates in the operating capabilities necessary to ensure the companies can reliably meet the growing demands of our South Carolina customers. This concludes my rebuttal testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Holloman. Chair Powers, Mr. Holloman is now available for questions from the parties in the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Athens. Sierra Club, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
SCCCL, SACE,
No questions.
Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association,
No questions, thank you.
Walmart,
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Belson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Holman.
Good afternoon.
You've mentioned in your rebuttal and in your summary the two highest reliability risks identified by NERC. Can you expand on that and where that's coming? I mean, I know it's coming from NERC, but can you just expound on that a little bit?
Certainly, I can help with that, I believe. So just a little explanation of NERC, North American Electric Reliability Corporation. It is the entity empowered by the federal government to monitor the reliability of the bulk electric system, the grid. They are the ERO, the Electric Reliability Organization. They are the ones
what?
that, Electric Reliability
No, you said
Organization.
they are the
ERO.
ERO. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And it stands for Electric Reliability Organization. And they are the ones that have been given authority to develop and enforce mandatory reliability standards. If you look on any of recent NERC documents, there's a banner in there. It says reliability, security, resiliency, because over 400 million citizens of North America are counting on us. They are the overseers of grid. Now, we are an implementer within that structure, within CERC. CERC used to stand for the Southeastern Electric Reliability Corporation. Now it's so big, it goes beyond the Southeast, so it's just CERC. Both the DEP and DEC in the Carolinas are part of CERC. And so it's NERC's job to look at the current state and the potential future state and make observations on the reliability of the grid. And the two areas that they have highlighted, both in the most recent 2024 reliability report that came out, I believe, in June, are the changing grid, the transformation of grid that we're now seeing. And they specifically speak about the common retirement of coal across the Eastern Interconnection. The Eastern Interconnection is that part of the grid that stretches from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean, Canada to the tip of Florida, over to the border of Texas. In my opinion, it's the largest machine that humans have ever built, the most complex machine that humans have ever built. That's debatable, but this massive amount of people and machines and processes operate synchronously. That is at the same frequency. Frequency is the equivalent of the pulse rate of the grid. It operates together. If there's an event in the tip of Florida, you'll see it in Canada. And so NERC has said the changing generation mix where there's no diversity of outcome. Most utilities that I'm aware of are retiring coal. Most utilities that I'm aware of are building a significant amount of solar and are looking to move significant amount of batteries. So there's no diversity of direction and condition. And that NERC should bring that up as a concern. The other piece is performance of our assets. I think NERC concludes that if you look at the general performance of our existing generation fleet, and when I say our, I'm talking about the Eastern Interconnection for us, they do see an increase in issues with performance. And that's just not the older assets like coal. It's also the newer assets. There have been several events where renewable assets, mainly solar, have behaved counter to what is expected. The Odessa event in Texas is one of those events. There's been several reports on that. That's part of the learning curve for us as an interconnection to figure that out. In my opinion, that had everything to do with how do you commission these assets. Because it's vital that system operators understand how these new technologies work. If you don't, you're putting operators, system operators, I used to be one, I've represented them for years, you put them in an unplanned for state. That's not where you want them to be. You want them to be in a place where we've trained them, we've put them through the gauntlet of simulation testing, and they understand what they need to do if they're in that condition. That's the value of diversity. We need to provide our operators as we go through this journey of energy transition. And you can see in our integrated resource plan, there's a lot of change over the next several years, 15 years here in South Carolina. we've got to make sure that we provide them a full toolbox of tools to be able to manage this transition. And it's just not megawatts and megawatt hours. NERC describes them, and I know this is a long answer,
No,
Mr. Belzer,
that's fine.
but NERC describes these capabilities as essential reliability services. And megawatts and megawatt hours are part of that. And the subtlety between megawatts and megawatt hours is this. When you hear somebody talk about megawatts, they're generally talking about a peaking hour. How many megawatts was your peak? If people are talking about megawatt hours, that's the accumulation of megawatts over a window of time. That's telling you, can this asset help us 8760? That's the number of hours in a year. Those are both really important system operators, but they're not the only two things that are important. Can a resource regulate? That means, can you put the device or the tool or the asset under automatic generation control and let it balance the load to the generation? Or can it respond to an operator instruction? When an operator called and said, I need you to move up 10 megawatts, down 10 megawatts, I need you to increase your voltage support. Voltage is kind of like the blood pressure of the grid. Is it providing spinning mass? That's called inertia. That's the resistance to change. Can it be used for contingency response? Contingency response, and we have a balancing standard, balancing load, resource generation. It's the BAL standard, 002. When we lose a unit unexpectedly, we know it can be lost, but we don't know when. We have 15 minutes to call on contingency reserve resources to restore balance. If we miss one, we're non-compliant. And Commissioner Bowser, you said you don't like the word non-compliant. I don't either, but we're judged on that a lot. But
no, I know utilities don't like to be accused of being non-compliant. Is what I'm
yeah, we
saying.
work really hard not to be compliant. And so all those things are the capabilities that operators care about. And I think that's the beauty of our IRP planning process right now. We're taking operating experience, the knowledge that system operators have, and we're plowing it into the planning process. We used to not have to do that because, 15, 20 years ago, and I've been with the company 39 years, 38 in operations, you had to worry about 2 hours. You had to worry about the peak of the summer and the peak of the winter. And the reason you could do that is you had assets that we had decades of operating experience with, whether it was coal, whether it was nuclear, whether it was pump storage, whether it was conventional hydro, or whether it was natural gas. I think I covered them all. And so you had confidence, if I can meet my peak in the summer, if I can meet my peak in the winter, I can handle the other 8758. That's 8760 minus 2. And so we've moved into a much different place. We're retiring over 8,400 megawatts of coal between now and somewhere in the mid-30s. And those coal units provided a lot of essential reliability services. We're replacing them with, in my opinion, a good fit, and that is natural gas. But we've got to be careful on diversity there. We can't put all our eggs in that basket. And we're gaining operating experience with solar, with batteries, and with grid edge products. And so NERC looks at all that and they say, okay, this is a risk because everybody's going through the same state of condition. There's no diversity. And so they're cautioning the industry, they're cautioning the consuming public, and for us, those are our customers, we've got to manage this very carefully. We've got to be deliberate, we've got to be disciplined, and we've got to have correct pace in doing this right. So that was a really long answer to your question. Sorry about that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer. Commissioner Cassidy.
You mentioned something, I think you were talking about either the NERC study or NERC report or from the, I guess, Texas events and such as that.
In the Odessa event, yes, sir.
I probably wish Mr. Roberts would have mentioned it so I could ask him about that. As I recall, in that report, there was concern, I guess, with either standardizing or doing more evaluation of inverters and utilities. And I'm not saying Duke's doing this, but I'm going to ask. Almost doing like a check the box thing for interconnections. And as I recall, that report was basically saying there needs to be a deeper dive by the utilities into the intricacies, looking at system-wide effect of variable resources, solar. That may have been what it was specifically about. I honestly don't recall. Into the system. So having said all that, has Duke adopted that position, or have they always done that?
So you were, I think, roughly right about your description of that event. I think what it illustrates is the need to make sure we understand how devices, and it doesn't really matter, I'm agnostic to the technology of the fuel, how devices act in the real time. And I think as I look at the way we're planning and developing the IRP, we're executing on a concept that we take really seriously at Duke, and that is you plan to operate so that you can operate to the plan. And for us, that's P3 fall base. That's really important. And I see our planning process doing that. They ask me to help them. Help us gauge the operability of these portfolios. And as I look at it, and I look at how we've tested the system through the reliability validation process, we've asked ourselves, okay, does it ensure reliability? Does it meet the metrics that Winterman will talk about, the 1 in 10 year? Can it handle the changing loads, 40 years of weather, including some extreme weather conditions, the 5 years of forced outage rates? That's really important to operators. As I look at, I'm no planner and I'm not an IRP person, don't pretend to be, but as I see the discipline and the rigor we've put into this planning process, I'm going, they're listening to us. They're listening to us as operators. And part of that is commissioning these devices so that we know how they perform. That's really important. And I think the industry as a whole is moving quickly in that direction to avoid events like the Odessa event.
I hope so. And I heard what you said, but, and I'm going on a really weak memory right now with that NERC report, but it didn't seem to me that the IRP was that in-depth evaluation or study that NERC was talking about. And you were right, tying in 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, whatever it is. I think in this case it was variables. And I don't know if it's exclusive to that, but that I can't recall if it encouraged or say, okay, we need to get together and probably force this issue of utilities doing a significant study before basically any interconnection of consequence. So that would be an individual thing, not in an IRP, but like for everyone that you have you evaluated it system-wide? What effect is it going to have on neighboring systems? And I can't remember if they talk about more study or standardizing inverters or whatever, but it was fairly terse.
So you're right. What the report spoke to in terms of future discipline, future process, is not necessarily directly identical to an IRP process, but it's coupled because it's part of the interconnection process. So the way it works generally is when a device comes on the system, and it doesn't matter if it's nuclear, coal, natural gas, hydro, pump storage, solar, or batteries, there's a process that they have to commission and prove that they can perform like they said they can perform. And the operator, the operator of the system, which in this case would be an energy control center or a place where the system operators, that particular BA, reside, they give a permission to operate. So until you can demonstrate, I can provide reactive support, which is voltage support. I can regulate, which means I can respond to the signals you're giving me. I can load follow, which means I can ramp up, I can ramp down, or I can come offline and come back up later on. All those capabilities that they say they can. If they say they can't, then that's fine. But the capabilities that they have said they can perform, we have to have a commissioning process to make sure they can do it. And this is after it's ready to be operated. This isn't a conceptual exercise. This is a let's see it, show me kind of situation. And then the operator, the grid operator, will say, I grant you permission to operate. That gives us a lot more assurance that device, regardless of the technology, regardless of the fuel, is ready to be a contributing part of ensuring reliability, security, and resiliency to our customers. In the case of South Carolina, our 835,000 customers of Duke Energy. And I'll give you one illustration that may help some, and I've thought about this some. So in terms of capabilities, so I don't go in, I've been an operator so long, I don't go anywhere without 2 pairs of glasses. In case one breaks, I got 2. I don't go anywhere without 2 pens in case one breaks. If you look at my book bag, you'll find 2 highlighters. It's just I've been around operators so long in operations, that's what we do. Don't take anything for granted. Always have a backup. When I was driving down Monday, it started raining, and I realized I don't have an umbrella. So the fact that I have backup writing utensils, the fact that I've got backup reading utensils doesn't do me any good in the rain. That's a demonstration of capability. They're unique. They're related, but they're unique. Fortunately, I'm not going to melt. It's not going to mess up my hairdo, so it doesn't bother me. But it doesn't work for operators. There's a law of implement. I don't know if you've ever heard it, and I'll try to paraphrase it for you. It says that if all you have in your toolbox are hammers, then all your problems look like nails. And think about a carpenter. He can't always use a hammer. He may need something that can do fine work. So that idea of all hammers doesn't work for carpenters. I can promise you it doesn't work for operators. That's going to put them in an unplanned for state. And I am highly confident through the process that we've gone through the IRP process that we're in a place with P3 fall base that we can move forward confidently within a concept of, and I'm going to add 2 pieces to check and adjust because I think it's important. It's a plan, do, check, adjust. That's the accountability model for operational excellence. And if it's just checking and adjusting, that's almost an academic exercise. You got to be doing something. We're in an execution mode. We need your help, your oversight as we move into this very important execution mode to plan, do, check, and adjust. And that's why I'm so encouraged with the way we're working this, that we're taking operators' experience, we're plowing it into the analysis, acknowledging that there are a lot of unknowns out there. There's a lot of independent variables that we'll have to check and adjust back with y'all to make sure this is the right direction for the citizens of South Carolina. But I had a strategy professor tell me one time, if you don't have the courage to check and adjust, that is, say, what if I'm wrong, or do we need to change our strategy? If you don't have that courage, the strategy is not worth the paper it's written on. So we've got to have that courage here in South Carolina to check and adjust with you all to make sure we're moving in the right direction.
Plan, do, check, act. Thank you, Mr. Holman. I suspect folks expect to flip that light switch on and it worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They did with water too.
Yes, sir.
As my predecessor used to say, they only thought about us typically 2 times. When they turned the tap on and nothing came out, and when they got their bill. I suspect the same with you guys.
And I think is you may wonder why do they say check and adjust? Why are they so focused on diversity and balance and pace? It's because we're talking about the most critical of the critical infrastructures in North America. As NERC says, 400 million citizens of North America depend on this. In South Carolina, every single citizen, of which I am one, depends on us getting this right. It's not a matter, this isn't an academic exercise. We shouldn't be using the grid as a laboratory. We've got to build a reliable, dependable process to get us from here out 15 years and beyond, because it's the most critical of the critical infrastructures in North America.
Thank you, Mr. Holman, and I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Chair
Commissioner
Powell.
Thomas.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You used the word commission several times, and I think I know what you mean when you say how these things were commissioned, but would you just kind of please go over that for me? What does it mean when you're talking about how these are commissioned?
Yes, sir. And I'm not directly involved in the commissioning process, but I have participated in the development of some of the processes. So what it means is this. So is a customer, it could be a developer comes to Duke and says, I want to cite a device on your system. And I'm just going to keep it kind of technology fuel agnostic. And so Witness Roberts talked about the interconnection process. There's a FERC mandated interconnection process where they make requests. And part of that is an analysis, okay, where this is going to be sited, what does it do to the grid? That's one piece of this. There's another piece of the process where you're validating, commissioning the capability of the asset that the asset constructor has told you they can perform. And I gave you kind of a list. And for us, it's almost a checklist, essential reliability services. What type of, does it have the ability to respond to the operator's instruction? That's kind of dispatchability. If I'm an operator of an asset and you call me and say, hey, Sam, I need you to move up 10 megawatts. Can I respond and repeat it back in three-part communication? You're asking me to move up 10 megawatts. You say, yes, I am. I move that generator up 10 megawatts. That's dispatchability. And can it do it? Okay, show me. Let's demonstrate it in live action. Can you do it? Can you respond to your voltage schedule? Every generation connected to the system has some type of voltage schedule they have to meet. Can they keep up with that? If they're telling us I can regulate, you can put me on automatic generation control and just cut me loose. Okay, show me. And so we go through this checklist based on what that asset constructor has told us they can do. And we go, okay, we've seen that, check. We've seen that, check. Oh, we haven't seen this yet. We're not going to grant you that permission to operate until we see that. And so it's kind of a dual accountability to make sure that asset can perform as expected. So when we train our operators in NERC in the PER standards, the Personnel Qualification and Performance Standard, we have to job task verify every single system operator dealing with that particular balancing authority on how that device should operate. We have to train them. And until we do that, they can't operate. So there's dual accountability to get this right. But it's really making sure, I use the word commission, that might not be the right verb, but it's just making sure the asset's going to perform in a predictable way. And the predictable is what they've told us. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes, I think that helps. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Mr. Hallman, good to see you again.
Good to be here.
Good. How in thinking about how you're assuring the truly commissioned, the accurate use of devices, is AI influencing how you operate?
So I'm probably not the right person to assess that, but I think we will take any type of help we can get in determining and validating the capabilities of any assets that's connecting to our grid, because it's really important. Like I said, you don't want to put an operator, hey, I can call on Sam and he can give me 10 megawatts, and then they call me, I go, sorry, I can't do it. That's not what we want. That's putting the operator in an unplanned for state. But I'm not an AI expert. I'm not in our information technology group, but I think there's some potential there.
I appreciate your taking the question. Let me see if I've got another one. What do you think about the rapid deployment that is, and is it a risk that is being added to the system, given the amount of load growth and what you're responding to?
So I think that's why NERC, and this is President Jim Robb, he's spoken about the importance of pace. And Jim Robb's the president of NERC. He's talked about the importance of the industry managing pace, because you really don't want to retire before you replace. You've got to make sure you've got that foundation of capability so that you can integrate these newer technologies into the system. I think a good example is the grid edge technologies, the customer sited technologies. Some people call them VPPs. I'm not particularly a fan of virtual power plants, the term, but I'm a big fan of the technology. We use that regularly. On July 9th, we used it when we set the all-time summer peak. It's a partnership with our customers on helping us to manage these conditions that are really difficult. Now, the thought is, and I'm a fan of this pushing out the ideas, is that maybe we can make those more dispatchable. Maybe we can push that ability out from the emergency type conditions into the day-to-day operations. I think the industry is hopeful that will develop, but I think I've shared this with this commission before. Hope's not a plan in the world of a system operator. You've got to give them something they can count on, they can depend on. It's proven, it's dependable, it's reliable. And I'm hopeful that the grid, the customer-sided technology will improve over time. But we've got to maintain reliability through that development period.
Is there a better term for for what we've been calling virtual power plants?
I think virtual power plants is fine, but I think it's the reason I question it is virtual means almost but not the same, and power plant means and I looked this up on Google under Webster's dictionary. Power plant's a facility that generates electricity, which means all these essential reliability services. I like what Witness Duff talked about. It's demand response, it's demand side management, it's customer sided resources. I'm all about partnering with our customers because that's the center of everything. Is our customers. That's what we're focused on. Our purpose at Duke Energy is powering the lives of our customers and the vitality of our communities. And I think the more we can be transparent and be open and be willing to adhere to the concept that iron sharpens iron, I think we have a much better chance of being successful moving forward.
You remind me that the first time I heard the term virtual power plants, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I've gotten really used to saying VPPs and I understand it now, but I had an initial, exactly what you said about what it sounds like it is.
I really am appreciative for the capabilities it brings to the table. We use
Right.
it. It's helped us in many places, and I'm hopeful that we can expand that capability, but hope's not a plan.
Yeah. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Mr. Holman, your confidence in your ability to speak is excellent. You're easy to listen to. And I've never heard the electric system, as you put it, called the world's largest machine. That is really interesting. And which raises one point with me is that why aren't rates more uniform? Why does South Carolina, North Carolina have higher rates than many other states?
So I would refer that question to Witness Bateman, perhaps, later on from a regulatory perspective. My limited knowledge in that space is I think the rates in the Carolinas are very competitive. I mean, I believe that's why a lot of people are moving here. A lot of businesses want to site here. I think that's part of the challenge. You've seen in the supplemental analysis what we think is going to happen over the next 15 years with our customer growth, with this economic development. Mr. Spillman, Witness Spillman, can talk about that in a minute. I mean, it's big. I mean, it's a lot of growth, and that's people moving to the Carolinas, South Carolina specifically, and customers, large customers, wanting to site here. And I think that shows some degree of competitiveness in South Carolina, which as a South Carolinian, I'm proud of.
I thought they came here because they liked us.
They probably do that too.
Okay, thank you very much. Any redirect?
No redirect.
Thank you, Ms. Athens.
Yeah, Chair Powers, could the witness be excused?
He can be excused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holman. Mr. Welborn, Mr. Torrey, and everybody else. We had a dead stop time today of 5 o'clock and was hoping it worked out to 4:45, just because of traffic and other things. You've got 2 panels left, which I think will require extensive time for questioning by both parties and commissioners. We also have the rebuttal from ORS and I think one other witness as well. Anyway, we're not going to finish tomorrow, obviously, with a stop time of 3 o'clock. And I just think it may be better if we just start fresh in the morning. I hate to waste an hour, but I think we would get caught in the middle of testimony, and I just don't know that it would serve the best purpose, both for the lawyers and for the commissioners, to do that, which means we may let school out early today. Is there any objection to that?
No objection at all, Chair Powers.
Okay, does it make sense?
100%, yes, sir.
Okay. Well,
I have one small request before we break. I have a conflict for tomorrow, and I would like permission from the commission, if the parties are okay with it, to be virtual for the rest of the hearing. And I have a colleague to listen in for me tomorrow. And I can certainly return if the commission would like me to come in person. I can do that too for next week, but I definitely have a conflict for tomorrow. So as long as the commission and the parties are okay with it, I would definitely like to be our client to be participating virtually.
Ms. Eaton, that's perfectly fine with the commission. I don't think anybody else would have an objection.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's come back at 9:30 in the morning. We are adjourned.